It's time for the Access of Easy podcast, the weekly technology digest that keeps you ahead of the curve. Brought to you by EasyDNS.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Access of Easy podcast. This is number 336, the audio sidekick to the weekly newsletter, all the latest and greatest in data breaching and overreaching at accessofeasy.com. You can sign up, get the newsletter right to your inbox, read all the stories we don't talk about, plus ones we do. All the links are in there. And you get a little bit of discount on your next EasyDNS purchase as well. My name is Joey, here with Len. As always, brother, what is going on over there? We're doing it on Thursday night this week instead of Friday morning. How's things?
Yeah, it's good. I like the Thursday night. I'm still fresh. I'm still ready to go. Got some plans on the rest of my evening. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to wrapping this one up and being all wired up as a result of this one. How about you? How are things over with you, Joey?
They're good, man. We were just talking before we started recording here. I'm about an hour and a half or so into the Tucker Putin interview. I have that planned for the rest of the night, and maybe also learning, as I was lamenting to you earlier, or someone earlier, Anchor, the podcasting we use, is eliminating the episode building thing on the web app, which we've been using. Well, I've been using in earnest every week. So they're eliminating it in favor of something called Riverside. So I might mess around with that a bit tonight too, as a sidebar. But all said, man, everything's good. No complaints over here. Things are going well. We have a number of good stories tonight. Maybe we should start, as always, with the quote of the week from last week. It was, by and large, language is a tool for concealing the truth. That's by George Carlin, great comedian, all-timer. Do you think George Carlin could have done a good Putin interview?
I don't know. I don't know much about him. I know you're a big fan of his, but I can't say if he would, or is he still with us too? I don't even know.
No, he passed away. I think he had cancer, maybe the early aughts. I think he passed.
Yeah, that's how little I know of him and his work. So, yeah. What do you think? Do you think he'd do a good interview with Putin?
I think he would. Fun fact, you're a little older than me. The millennial crowd first met George Carlin, though he was famous, obviously, for his crass and very, very hard-hitting, a reminder, is very human comedy act. He was a character on a show on YTV in the 90s called Shining Time Station. And he was the miniature Mr. Conductor living inside a jukebox, I believe, if I remember correctly. And the stories about Thomas the Tank Engine would always start with George Carlin giving some little quip and blowing his whistle. So I don't know how this guy made it from the biggest comedy clubs in the country to Shining Time Station. It's a story I'll maybe never hear if it's not out there already, but interesting. So millennials found him through Shining Time Station, at least Canadian millennials, and then probably in university. And the first time I started watching his stand-up, you find out this is the same guy blowing the whistle in the jukebox, also talking about the 7 words you can't say on TV, none of which I can say on
that.
I
remember.
That's for sure.
But that was back in the early 90s. That stick. So that's how far back it dates. And at that time too, those words, they were actually verboten for being spoken on TV. Yeah. Nowadays, you get by with so much more than that. Maybe even all 7 of those words are now able to be talked about on TV.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Anyway, so that was last week's quote. Good sidebar there. This week's quote, probably not from George Carlin, though I make no promises. If something can corrupt you, you're corrupted already. That's a great quote. And if you know who that quote's by, you know the rules. No Googling, none of that stuff. Okay, don't pervert the process. All right. Search it up, put it in the comments, and you get your next renewal on Mark and the team at EasyDNS. So, Len, this week, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stories. 6 stories? Sank. I thought you said 6. Okay, yeah. Let's get into it. Where do you want to start? I got them all pulled up here.
That's deepfake stuff, because this stuff is really becoming a thorn in the side for a lot of people out there. Didn't even Taylor Swift suffer some sort of deepfake, and it's causing even the U.S. government to try to get involved to stop that? But I don't want to get into specifics. But it's a matter of time before somebody does it for us. Once you have your name and face out there, and people could easily, or not easily, at least it's readily available that you could get deepfake. But anyways.
Does this mean I can start my OnlyFans empire and then claim it's all deepfakes?
Potentially. Depending on how good deepfakes are, because I haven't even seen any of them, to be honest. So I can't tell if it's actually I have seen some of those interviews where they do an interview with somebody and they try to make it look like it. But you can kind of tell the lips just don't really match.
I know.
Right?
I'm with you there. But it's getting closer. I mean, that's retail facing stuff. That's the stuff that gets released by, you know, Johnny No Ones all over the internet. You can imagine what kind of stuff is going on behind closed doors.
If they get the Google supercomputers working on this to make it really worthwhile for us. But anyways, this deepfake stuff, like the scammers, they're using it, and in this particular case, they're using it to deepfake and trick an employee. And this, they're doing the employees of companies. And this one in particular, this guy that was eventually duped, he gave money away. He gave company money away. So he was tricked into believing he was on video at a video call with the company's CFO and other executives, but they were actually deep fakes. And the employee was initially suspicious, but the scammers were able to ease their doubts by inviting them into a video call with other deep fakes. And that's basically what happened. So the employee then moved over $25 million of the company's money, but afterwards he realized he was been subjected to a scam. I did some digging into this story because everything I've read, and even the CNN article, doesn't name the company that was duped here. So are we being deep faked from this article, from this story? I don't know. They always call it the same thing, a multinational firm. I went on many articles, and that's the only way they describe this company that was sending out the money to the deep faked, the hackers out there. It's a multinational firm that's based out of Hong Kong. Nothing more than that. So it makes me wonder, what is this? Is this a real story? Is it a fake story? Because without definitive evidence, I'm wondering myself. But anyways, one thing is for certain, that the deepfakes, they are becoming more sophisticated. And people nowadays have to be on guard when they're dealing with other people as well. It's too bad we're getting to this point where people are now have to be suspicious of even their fellow coworkers. But not only that, also the companies themselves. It's inherent on them to also improve the security measures. And that way they can prevent outsiders from entering and doing this and having money siphoned away from their coffers. So yeah, there you go. Deepfake. It's making news these days. Taylor Swift isn't the only one. This company lost 25 million, but I'm wondering, is it a real company or not? It's a multinational firm. Name? Who the heck knows?
How did this? Okay, two things. One, is this a psyop to get us all back to the office full time in every scenario because you can't deepfake an interaction in the hallway or in a meeting room?
I never thought of that. Potentially, is the work from home still a problem for employers? Are they still trying to bring people in? Is there a pushback from employees from having this? I don't know.
That's number one. Number two, this multinational corporation, how is it possible one man can move $25 million in this organization?
He was deploying more capital.
Yeah, is that what that meant? Okay.
Yeah. And he deployed it.
Steady lads, deploying more capital. I don't know how this happened. You're right. I'm a little frustrated that there's not a lot of like breadcrumbs to follow here. I will note that there's like notes at the bottom of the article about Intel, Meta, some other companies here that have like ways to figure out how to combat deepfakes and identify deepfakes. We're entering into a very interesting era of like very public cat and mouse with deepfakes and AI. We've talked about this before, and I think we've talked about it on the front, privacy front, maybe on the Bitcoin front too. But there's a lot of cat and mouse here between governments and different companies that are trying to create and obfuscate and identify deepfakes. And I don't know who's going to win this, but isn't it true? I believe that what we're going to see is a major event where a deepfake causes a huge issue. Either a war, economic crisis, whatever. I mean, we talked on this show a couple weeks ago and on CBP about how what's his name? Gensler had his phone SIM swapped and, caused the price of Bitcoin to go up 10% and then down 10%, basically in the same 35, 45 seconds. And that was just a guy getting a text message. Imagine if a video came out of the president saying that, China had invaded Taiwan or something like that. Like, that's not inconsequential, and it's fairly easy to do. And thanks to Twitter, that stuff spreads around the world in a second. It doesn't take, Walter Cronkite. You don't have to wait till dinner time to hear Walt tell you that something has gone wrong abroad.
All this takes is just one of those body doubles. There's probably, hundreds of them out there for Biden. And instead of just going by the script, he goes off the script and just goes rogue and says that, yeah.
I mean, he's doing that. He's doing that anyway, right? Every time the guy talks, it's like a marble milkshake in his mouth. That one clip of him at the brewery is maybe one of the funniest things I've ever seen. The memes that have come out of that are incredible. It's like, this is how I sound after 6 IPAs when the waitress comes by and asks me what I'm doing after I'm done. Well, there's some beers I've had here.
You know, I don't want to make this all about Biden, this story, but in the past 4 years, if you look at him debating with Trump, and the debate is a one-on-one, it's high profile. There's, you're basically on stage and there's nobody feeding you information at that time that you were fed beforehand. And if you look at his performance there, how he acted, and just his command of his body, it's changed so much in the past 4 years. For the worse, unfortunately. I mean, everybody gets old, but man, this is,
it's happening fast. It's happening fast. If you haven't seen the commentary on the legal case about the classified documents he was holding, I suggest you read it, listener, viewer, and you too, Len. It's interesting to that end. Anyway, let's move on to the next story.
I want to know more about that. I'm gonna have to look into this later. It sounds like another.
It's not great. It's not great.
Did they just nail Trump to the cross for this?
No. It's the Biden documents, not.
But did they nail?
Yeah. It's the Biden documents. The long and short is that they basically say the guy's clearly experienced cognitive decline to the point where they can't. They can't clearly identify that he had Anyway, story for another time. But I highly recommend that you read the excerpts from that.
Well, it's a shame that we never had this guy doing his craft, because he probably would have leaked a lot of that information. His name is Joshua Schulte. Schulte?
Schulte? How do you say
Schulte, yeah. That's according. I watched a video on this just to confirm his last name. He's an ex-CIA software engineer, and he, unfortunately, or depending on how you look at it, fortunately, he was leaking information. And this information leak was handed over to WikiLeaks, and everybody knows about this. And eventually he was caught, and he was just sentenced to 40 years in prison for this leaking of classified information. And he was up for 80 years. So I guess the judge was being lenient in his ruling. So this guy was a former CIA agent and is convicted on espionage. And it's a pretty damning thing to do. And this was done earlier in the year. And he was accused of stealing documents and hacking tools from the agency and then providing them to WikiLeaks, and everybody knows what happened there. And the details that he was leaking includes on how the CIA was turning these internet-connected televisions into listening devices. And the prosecutors, this is interesting, were saying that the motive was to get revenge against his superiors because he felt that he was being mistreated by them. But it goes to show you, this whole WikiLeaks saga, how important it is to maintain privacy and security. A lot of us are now plugging these Internet of Things, the IoT devices, and they have either cameras and or microphones on it. And those are access points to our lives, our private conversations, everything that happens within our home. And as long as these things exist, there could potentially be backdoors to enable people to listen to them. People should be aware and be very, very concerned about deploying more of these. And you talked about, you can't even, in a previous Access of Easy episode, even finding a TV nowadays that doesn't have these is virtually impossible. So if you are going to purchase a TV, unless it's going to be one of the old CRT models, CRT, and that's big ass TV, you're kind of stuck, right? Like, unfortunately, you're forced to get something. So even if you are diligent and trying to protect yourself, you're still, unfortunately, just because of the products you're going to be buying just to live your life, you're going to be subjected to some sort of surveillance, unfortunately. And Joshua Schulte's case, it just goes to show you that CIA was trying to listen, and he's been, well, in this case, he was nailed to the cross. 40 years. He may not see the light of day at the end of this. He's 33 years old. So if he gets out early, maybe. If not, he could spend the rest of his life in prison.
Looks unlikely. There doesn't seem to be much of an appetite for people who leak to get out early or get light sentences in the United States. I should note, I didn't mention this to you before the show, but Zero Hedge reporting about a couple of hours ago at this point that Tucker Carlson also spent a few hours with Edward Snowden while he was in Russia. Speaking of WikiLeaks and violations of the Espionage Act, I don't know what else can we say really without getting banned. So I'm interested in anything related to leaking state secrets, only because I think that there's value in keeping the state accountable. I mean, I think everyone believes this, right? You can only really know the things you see and share, and everything else is kind of behind a, opaque wall at this stage, right? Whether it's economic policy or war policy or, any number of different things. Not much is really truly transparent, is it? I mean, even to the point, Len, where you look at some of like the bills that pass in the United States, the stuff that's supposed to be transparent, it's impossible to read through all these things and know what's in them before they're voted on, passed, or voted down. I commend this guy, although I just would say to people who think that there's any other outcome when stuff like this gets uncovered and the person who's doing the leaking gets caught, if you think there's going to be another outcome, I'm just not sure why at this stage. You literally have Assange in jail overseas, never getting out. You have Snowden exiled in Russia for exposing the Patriot Act abuses. And now this fella, for whatever secrets he's leaked. And the trend will probably continue. Remember Trump was the guy who was supposed to pardon Snowden and just never did it. Same with Assange, never did it. Like, there's no party that's going to start pardoning leakers because it's just such a dire set of consequences for the public to hear some of these things for the first time and understand like how they're being spied on or whatever. It's just, if you expect this to change, I would suggest changing your view.
It would look awful if he were to pardon them, because then it opens up the doors to copycats out there.
Yeah, for
to
sure.
really do something to take down the government. And who knows, maybe Trump may change his mind if he ever gets reelected, because if he does get reelected, it's going to be a single term because he can't run for a third term. So because of that, maybe he'll be able to do stuff that he just doesn't care about the future in terms of his political career, because he doesn't have a political career, a future after this. So who knows, maybe he will decide to pardon these guys. But then again, who the heck knows?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. I'm indifferent. I don't want to talk too much about that for fear of getting banned, because I want to talk about Google, and their cache system is now a thing of the past. And everybody out there that has used Google is aware that they had a cache system where you could go on a website and you could look at previous pages that were cached by Google. But they decided to go away with this, and this decision was it's because of the load that's required and all the manpower and all the expenses that has to go along with doing this. So because of this, because you're no longer able to do it or providing the service to people, we're now forced to rely on other places like Internet Archives and others that are able to still provide this service. But for how long? That's got to be a costly endeavor for these guys, all the storage and whatnot, just to keep that up and running. So I'm not a big fan of this, because this provides less choice out there. I like choice. I want to have different choices out there. And it's too bad that Google decided to not continue this. I understand that there's a cost along with it, and I don't think this is a very profitable endeavor, having the cache stuff. They have a monopoly right now on the search engine. If I'm going to search anything, predominantly it would be Google. I'm sure everybody else is the same thing. The removal of this cache is not going to really change my opinion of using their system, but it's just one less place we could go to look at the archives of web pages. And I prefer to have as many options as possible. So I'm not a big fan of this, but then again, I think this is just kind of a small thing in a grand scheme of things. This isn't going to change my opinion of them. I kind of hold them in a pretty bad regard, to be honest, as it is. So yeah, too bad, so sad. And one less thing they're going to be offering us.
Yeah, I think the big concern here, if I can put on my conspiracy hat for a sec, when do you use the Internet Archive? Do you know when you use it most frequently?
I'm trying to think. Just when I'm curious.
No.
When it's just curiosity. When I'm trying to find something. When would I use it?
When you need to get through. When you need to get through a paywall.
Okay.
So that's a big use for this. I think that there's a real.
You don't use a 12-foot ladder?
12-foot ladder uses the same thing. It's archive.is, 12-foot ladder. It's all the same. It's the same product, different skin, as far as I understand it. So I think that when I look at this, Google has no reason to pull this down. Stuff like this doesn't get more expensive with time. It gets less expensive. Technology grows and is deflationary in terms of cost, right? You get way more for your dollar in tech, especially as you become the expert. So I don't buy for a second this is about cost. What I think it's about, Len, is that the media outfits, the legacy Leviathan, is tired of giving away stuff for free vis-a-vis the Internet Archive. And that's really what I think this is about, because a lot of people now are looking at red lines and articles, official and unofficial. They're going through paywalls using archive.is or 12-foot ladder or whatever. And they're tired of it, I think. They want to be able to charge for the content, and they don't want people to go back and see the things they wrote that contradicted the things that are happening today, to start calling them for what they've been, which is, in the most generous interpretation, less than accurate in their reporting in the past. And I believe that this is probably the case. You could say that's a little tinfoil hat, but I would just suggest to you that if you look at Google's behavior when it comes to stuff like this, who do they usually side with, the user or the Leviathan? It's been the Leviathan over and over again. This would be another example. And it's almost too simple an explanation to ignore. That's what I think about this story.
Historically, they've just done stuff best for Google. They don't give a shit about either of the two.
Whatever.
You know, if you go look at YouTube, for instance, there's a lot of imitation that's going on out there, be it deepfakes or just something else that are just...
Okay, speaking of YouTube, Mark, when you listen to this next week, we need to talk about the Louis Rossmann app and YouTube attacking his channel for putting up this app. Have you heard about this, Len? Speaking of YouTube, so when I think about Google, this Internet Archive thing, we'll add this to the list of inputs. YouTube wants you to have to use the services that it likes, whether it's its own or others. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I would say this is a good example of that. You have to look at the Louis Rossmann thing because you're a Louis Rossmann fan like I am, and I forgot to talk to you about this. Interesting content. I won't spoil it here because I am expecting it to be in next week's Access of Easy. So until then, we won't talk about it. But it's a great story. As far as this goes, I like my theory. I think it's pretty sound. And to your point, yeah, Google does what's good for Google.
If you go look what's going on YouTube, often you'll find people imitating, stealing content, and they're not there to stop it. They're waiting for the person creating it or the company creating it to request it to be stopped. Mm-hmm. Because if it's out there, it's more eyeballs that Google's able to capture, more revenue Google's able to capture. They don't care. So Google's out there for Google. They're not out there to protect either the big businesses or the little guy. Whatever helps Google, that's what they're going to be trying to do. And yeah, maybe you're right in this regard for the cache system. I don't know. And you know what? I'm pretty sad that they're closing this off because, like I mentioned, I like options. I want to have options, and without one option, now we're kind of stuck with really just Internet Archive. That's the only one I could think of, web.archive.org.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyways, let's talk about iPhone. And there was a security vulnerability in the kernel, and it was actively exploited by hackers just very recently. And the vulnerability was affecting a wide range of Apple devices, including iPhones, Macs, Apple TVs, and Apple Watches. And Apple released the patches for this vulnerability in their iOS 16.2 and also the iPadOS 16.2 and the macOS Ventura and the tvOS 6.2, also the watchOS 9.2. So they did release the updates for this to close off this, and users are reminded to update their devices as soon as possible to protect themselves from potential attacks. And I'm pretty sure that Apple does a really good job trying to push those updates, and Apple users, they're just going to select I'm going to upgrade my system to make it to the newest version of the firmware and whatever. So I think that Apple does a really good job with pushing this out, and you're probably not going to have too many people out there running old stuff. But this is from the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. They're the ones that initially issued a directive requiring. This is interesting because U.S. federal agencies are using iPhones, and they're asking them, recommending that they patch this because the vulnerability also impacts the government employees' phones. And they're asking them telling them they should update it by no later than February 21st. And if you want to know what this vulnerability does, it's a vulnerability in the authentication mechanism. This allows attackers to bypass pointer authentication, and it's a security feature intended to prevent the exploitation of memory corruption vulnerabilities. So that's what this is trying to close off, and the latest patch does indeed fix it. So if you are using one of those devices I mentioned, I highly recommend upgrade it to the latest firmware, to the latest software, because if you do, you're going to be protected from these attacks. Because the exploitation, that's something nobody wants to hear. Think of all the information everybody puts on their phones, and you don't want to be subjected to an attack by somebody and take that information and use it against you.
Totally. Apple does a great job patching this stuff. They don't often talk about the vulnerabilities in retrospect, which I don't know if I'm a huge fan of. But here, obviously, you have some details. So, I mean, I don't have much to add to this. As always, the lesson that me and you try and pass on to people is just update your stuff with some frequency. You know, Apple doesn't always tell you when the updates are ready, but you can set on your phone. I just did this with my father-in-law, actually. You can set on your phone to always do required software updates overnight. So the phone will learn when you go to sleep and wait an hour and start doing the updates for you on Wi-Fi. You don't have to think about it. There's no need. It's like you have to actively be trying to sabotage yourself these days. So don't self-sabotage. Just let the phone update and you'll be happier that you did.
And use a phrase, seed phrase, if you're using a Bitcoin wallet. I would suggest that. It's a huge, I just want to add that to our talking points here. The last story is not really much of a story. It's more of a prediction by this dude, Bruce Schneier. And
what's his name? Schneier? Is it spelled wrong in the yeah, Schneier.
Right. Yeah. And so Bruce is hypothesizing what's going to happen in the future and how AI is going to be interacting with individuals, businesses, governments, you name it, on a very micro and a macro level. And he's saying that this could potentially be a very good tool for governments to use and even big businesses. And this guy he's a security expert, so he knows his stuff. So in terms of him trying to paint the future, again, it's nobody could say what's going to happen moving forward, but this guy, he's a very knowledgeable individual with respect to security. And he was going on to say that all this AI could be used as a way to spy on us in ways that we haven't even yet imagined. And for example, it could be sending us messages. It could be checking our websites, which we visit. Every place we go through our phones, it could analyze everything about us, like everything we're talking about. It could even predict who we're going to be hanging out with next.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to guess what we're going to be buying, and even spot trouble before it starts. It makes me wonder. Maybe it's going to be predicting if we're going to be committing a crime, just like they did in that movie. Is that Arrested Development or
no? Minority Report.
That's it. Yeah. So the guy is predicting that companies and governments alike are going to use this to send us even targeted ads, perfectly targeted ads, to exploit our weaknesses, because it's going to understand our strengths and weaknesses, and it's going to try to play on that. It will also send us news feeds filled with stuff that could change, that can invoke some emotions like anger or whatnot, that could change our opinions and stuff. So really, there's got to be some strong laws to protect against this privacy, because it's inevitable you're going to have AI that's going to be doing this. It's really be snooping on us and trying to manipulate our thoughts and what we do. And ethical AI is something we talked about in the past, the use of it and how it's going to be used moving forward. So really, it's the best thing we should do is stay informed. Hopefully lawmakers stay on top of it, but as we know, they're always reactionary than anything else. So they see something and then they try to react against it. So the onus may be on governments and businesses, but really it falls on the end user. Again, just like the story we talked about earlier, you got to be very careful. You got to be very you got to put up walls, put up guards against everything, because AI, once it encroaches on your life, it's going to be hard to get it out. And even look at the latest iPhone, Apple Vision. Is that what it's called? That yeah. So a lot of people are using it. You see like so many videos. It's a scary world, and that's another one where AI could manipulate somebody's their perception of reality, and that's messed up.
It's crazy. I would argue some of this stuff is already going on. Like, I think you and me used to joke at work. This was years ago, back when we were still working at the same place. It was either you or somebody else. Like, I really thought when I first started using Amazon with some frequency, like now there's an Amazon box coming to my house basically at least once a week. Like whether it's like something for my house or something like a cable I need replaced or whatever, something for my dog. I feel like Amazon, if I had to just let the algorithm take the wheel, okay? And I just stopped ordering stuff on Amazon, but I still said every week I want Amazon to look at the same stuff it looks at now when it makes suggestions to me. And I want it to send me something it thinks I'll buy. How many things do you think I would return in a system like that? How many things would go back to Amazon? My guess, Len, is honestly not that many. Like,
wow.
I would guess if it sent me one thing a week, I'd probably end up keeping more of those things than not. And as I started keeping them, it would get more and more precise. Once it knew like what other devices I had in the house and stuff like that, before you know it, like the recommendations it's giving you are pretty spot on. And this is not, anything new. The question is, and this is weird because obviously Zuckerberg was just like dragged in front of Congress last week and made to apologize for, allowing maybe child pornography images or whatever. I don't know exactly the nature of that question period, but the point is that they know that Facebook is doing harm with stuff like targeted ads and targeted, like allowing certain things. We know that YouTube is doing it, that Amazon is doing it, that What other services? Google search is doing it. Everything. Spotify is even doing it. Spotify will recommend you podcasts if you're a podcast listener. Same with Pocket Cast, same with all these apps. Everyone is trying to push you in a certain direction. Everyone, every major company. I don't know that this is already not happening in basically every silo, right? This thing is suggesting that you might be able to, find out personal information about people vis-a-vis spying. My question, and you probably have the same answer, Len. Why do you need to spy? They'll just give it to you. You put a listening device in people's homes. You put a Ring doorbell at their door. You know what time they get home. You know what kind of car they drive. You know if they like their neighbors. You know how many kids they got. You know if they got a dog. You know what kind of dog, what kind of keyboard they have, what kind of cameras they have. They don't need to spy on anybody. So, I appreciate Schneier's, prediction here. The point I would make is that you don't really need to be nefarious. The information is being given away. How many weeks do we talk about people putting their information willingly into honeypots and then the honeypot getting busted up? It's not that hard. I mean, if I gave, whoever my phone to look at, XYZ app, I'm sure you can find out a lot about me. The Amazon search history and buying history is just one piece. But like if you had all the apps working together and painting a pretty solid picture of like Joey the consumer, you could find out whether or not I was going to unionize my workplace pretty easily. Probably. Like, am I buying books about it? Am I, buying like, I don't know, Bolshevik comedy posters? It's not that hard. So I think this guy's probably right. Like I said, the only gripe I have is that he thinks it's going to be taken nefariously. I think it's going to be given up willingly.
What's the one common link between all those apps that you use and everything?
Oh no, what?
It's the phone.
Yeah, Apple stops the cross-app tracking, but I have my doubts that it's exactly doing what it says, right?
Yeah, trust me, bro.
Yeah.
Until I can review it and guarantee that's the case, we'll have our doubts about that. So that's really it. So if that's the case, then there you go. That's the predator in this whole situation.
The phone is only one piece too, right? Like, I think about like all the information that any service knows about me, like what does the bank know about me? The bank knows more about me than anybody. If the bank sells like my credit card data or Visa sells my credit card data, like it's over. They're going to know exactly what I buy and know how I am, who I am, what I'm about.
I would agree. I mean, if you're always ordering from Amazon, then that's going to be the only place that you can see that money's going to, aside from maybe going to the grocery store and stuff. It's hard to pinpoint, you're ordering a game for your PlayStation 5 from Amazon. It's virtually impossible to figure out exactly what it is you're ordering. So without then cross-referencing with the Amazon information. Yeah. So that's why the phone itself would potentially be able to get everything.
That's the link, you think? Yeah.
And it's the easiest one, right? Every one of these silos doesn't have enough information outside of it to truly make a connection, but they all report to the same place, the phone. And what does the phone do with it? I don't know.
Oh man, I'm cooked.
It's never too late to change your ways, Joey. But it's up to you to
change your evil ways. That's it for today. That's it. That was number 336. Good episode. If you want to come back and listen to us again next week, same time, same place, go to accessofeasy.com, sign up for the newsletter, subscribe to Len and I wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, take care of yourselves.